You'll notice in the last chapter I skipped the American Neoclassical. Well, I'm adding it here because I think it fits and it gives you a better sense of evolution, where we've gone from the first colonists in the early 17th century up to the Revolutionary period. Now, before the Revolutionary period, we see a lot of Chippendale. Now, Chippendale is going to be very, very popular in the United States. It speaks to the simplicity of sort of the American experience. They're going to like it a great deal, but that's going to change dramatically. And a lot of Chippendale in the United States is not going to be mahogany, although some is imported. A lot is going to be walnut and other native woods. Now, once we get to 1776, we enter what's called the Federal period. So we're dealing with sort of the early revolutionary America. And most of what you're going to see is either Hepplewhite style or Sheridan style, which we covered in the English Neoclassical. They're going to use exactly the same patterns. And remember, by this point, Sheridan, for example, is putting out pattern books talking about here's how furniture should look. And those books are easily transported over to the United States, whereas the furniture tends to be very expensive. So local makers are going to start working with that, and we see a lot of that Sheridan and Hepplewhite form. But we have some artisans working in other styles. We're going to see Duncan Fife. Now, he's coming out of Philadelphia, and he's going to take on the neoclassical style, more specifically the French neoclassical empire style. And he's going to use a lot of lutes, a lot of musical forms, instead of a lot of the applique that we see, for example, the brass work, etc., and gold work that we see on French neoclassical furniture, he's going to use ironwork where necessary, or maybe simply the caster feet will be highlighted. Oftentimes, he's going to work with a lot of veneers. Obviously, he's not working with a solid piece of burl here, and these tend to be very, very neoclassical. Now, that being said, remember Sheridan and Hepplewhite are still going on. We still have some William and Mary that's being created at the same time. In the United States, things do not follow the same logical progression. He will also create some of the earliest sofas in this, what will be termed by some people, the American Empire style. And this is usually referring specifically to the designs and ideas of Duncan Fife. Now, when we look at this, it has very neoclassical lines to it. It would look French neoclassical. We have the sweep. You can almost see the Christmas chair in the sweep of these legs. We have almost that boat bed feel in the frame as it curves down and around with its outward spirals at the arms, and then the same thing happening at the back as it curls back away from itself. Now, most of these pieces will be reupholstered, so you don't really have a good sense of the colors that are used, but typically we would be looking at maybe reds or yellows, generally very bright, vibrant colors when they're used. In the modern day, it would look very cartoonish to us or a little bit too gaudy for most people. Then we see the Hitchcock chair. So the Hitchcock chair is created by Lambert Hitchcock, and he's mass producing inexpensive chairs based roughly on the Sheraton Empire designs. And usually what he's doing is creating rush seats. And the chairs are going to be sometimes painted, the legs and stretchers are going to be turned, the crest rail is going to be shaped in some kind of gentle curve. So here we see it painted. We see a little bit of gold detail. The back, one of these back supports has been painted. The back rail is, of course, bent back a little bit. Of course, he's using steam bending for that. That's a lot easier than trying to lathe something that's got a curve into it intrinsically. And the crest rail or chair rail not only bends backwards in space, but it has a slight upwards curve. And you notice the larger piece in the middle. This is kind of a pragmatic element. it gives you a little bit more support there. So you're not pushing against a massive pressure point. The wider that curve, the more comfortable it's going to be. The rush seats, of course, are an economic element. It's a lot less expensive than trying to build the whole thing out of very expensive pieces of wood. And the paints on these chairs frequently wear off, so you'll often see them with partial painting. Also, don't be surprised when you see wood grain that isn't actually wood grain, but rather a faux finish that's been added to the wood, especially with these Hitchcock chairs. So this was an economical chair. He's trying to mass produce it and put it out to the people.